Attention passengers. This is your co-pilot speaking. Your pilot is black mind, so you are not going blind and there is no power failure. You are merely experiencing the immense blackness of his proximity, and when you hear his voice, you and the cabin will get even darker than you are currently. We will be cruising at the speed equal to light, because the one other thing that travels equally fast is darkness. Your loved ones awaiting your arrival may not recognize you at first sight. This is normal. Simply tell them about the pilot, and they will understand. We will taxi to the runway now, so please buckle up and prepare for a high-speed departure. Thank you for choosing Jet Black Airways, where the phrase Jet Black is also a verb. We hope you keep jetting black with us until the wings and the wheels fall off. Justice forever.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. To some of y'all, and peace out to the rest of you. As usual, hit the share button because the message is more important than the messenger. But this time, I'm also going to ask you guys to leave plenty of comments, both in the chat during this live as well as later on after you hear the replay or the playback. I know that this is a bad hour for many of you. For some of you, it's like 3 a.m. A lot of you on Eastern time, it's hell, it's actually about to be 4 a.m. And for others of you, it's almost 3 a.m. So that being said, I need to go ahead and give some shouts out because first off, to catch you guys up on why it is that I've had to record a bit less often than I want to. And I understand that based on the time, there won't be many of you that are tuning into this one. I may have to do this one again later, but I have to do this when I have the time. As a matter of fact, one reason I got started late was because I had to fill out a last-minute application that came to me. People have been very helpful. As a matter of fact, some of you subscribers have been helpful, hitting me up in my email with some links, and I follow up on them quick as I can. Now, I can't say exactly when, because if you're sending a link and it's a recruiter that you know, then I have to follow up, but I may have to do it at a time when I can see that that website's traffic is fairly heavy or medium. This way, I can't be singled out because I got to apply with my real name. I mean, you know, Black Mind is not written on my passport and driver's license and residency ID card, obviously. But a lot of you have been helpful, and you sent out information. And as a matter of fact, Base Muslim, you told me about Qatar. And I'm about to look for some listings specifically for them because they're not advertised heavily here in Saudi, obviously. I mean, you can't even get Al Jazeera here in Saudi Arabia. To see Al Jazeera, you got to go to Facebook. That's the funny thing about it. As far as monetizing the channel, if I'm ever out of Saudi, then I could do it because the Postal Service does not deliver mail to your door. And the U.S. Postal Service does not correspond with the unofficial postal services here or unofficial delivery services that are here, like Aramex and Samsung. So they're not, the mail is not sent through them. You got to order deliveries through them. So there's no way to get the PIN code that you would need to monetize. So everything I made through here, I made through you guys. And frankly, I'm cool with that because if I give a US address, then Google's going to tax me like I'm in the States. And if I wanted, I intentionally avoid tax liability in the States legally. I'm not liable for it. And I'm not going to sit up and buy bullets for the Ukraine. And I'm not going to buy bullets for Israel. And that's what I would be doing in effect. I had the opportunity to leave. I shouldn't waste that. Maybe I'll have it sent to an address in a third country later. It's possible. But this is why I've not been able to monetize this one. And you know what? I'm fine with that. Because in all honesty, Google has a bad habit of censoring. And the less I censor myself, the more they demonetize anyway. They have not shut down Cynthia G yet, but they want to, they took Andrew Tate off. He had to come back as Cobra Tate, I believe, and someone else had to come back for him under the name Cobra Tate. But they're shutting down or demonetizing or censoring or shadow banning those of us who tell the truth about the gender war. Because remember, we're not the ones fighting against women in the gender war. We're heterosexual. We have no interest in fighting against women in the gender war. They're shutting down us for not tolerating it. They're not shutting down women that are against us. And this goes to show that, that feminism is ruled by an undercurrent of misandry. By definition, they don't have to be the same. It doesn't matter. If the undercurrent is misandry, then that's enough. Because the undercurrent determines the surface current at all times. And frankly, feminism was, in fact, and still is run by an inner circle of women that don't even like men. I mean, they don't even organically like men. They're into other women. But the women they want are hetero women. And they're mad because they see us men as competition for the same women that they want. So they figure if there are just no men, or at least there are no masculine men, there's nobody for the women to like. And what is funny about this is that if women don't find masculine men, then they will settle for being the man for a feminine woman. In other words, women that are naturally hetero are willing to play the stud for a woman to remain a woman, rather than allow a man to have a normal human weakness. That's the training. And a lot of this is subconscious. So that being said, I'm going to start out by giving some donor shouts out. And here's and there's a good reason for this, but I'm going to start off. All right. So first off, in the future, the threshold is going to be 25. But for this one, because of the number of donors, the threshold doesn't have to be just that. Not this time, but in the future. First off, BGS donated. Shouts out to you and thanks a million. That really helped out. Simeon, you double helped out because you subscribed to the Patreon, became one of my Patreon passengers, and you still donated. Myron donated. I'm going to read either the first name or the last name, but I'm not going to be reading whole names only because nobody really gave permission to put their whole names out there. If it's like another username, yeah, of course, I'm going to go ahead and say something. As a matter of fact, Simeon, you came through twice. So from the bottom of my black heart and the depths of my black mind, thank you. Mr. Brewster came through with 50. Mr. Hunter, K. Hunter, came through with 50. Trash Bandit, I'm not calling him trash, that's his name, came through with 20. P. Armour came through twice, totaling out 10. Mr. Washington came through with 20. Mr. Bell came through with 10. Mr. Jefferson, who I believe is also a Patreon subscriber, came through with 25. Mr. Miller, Joe Schmo, and M. Miller, that was a double for you because you're also a Patreon passenger, and yet you still donated through Cash App. D. Reed, Joe Schmo came through with 21. Matthew, no last name, came through with 10. MLR came through more than once, one time with 15. Mr. Perry came through with 1. MLR came back and brought it up to an even 20. Jamal came through with 5. Mr. Reed came through again with another 4. Highest to date is S. Rogers, the autodidact. He came through with 500. Now, then later on, Mr. Grant came through with 555. My request, gentlemen, was for for each subscriber to send in 4. That was the request. The reason being that this way I can take care of everything else. I've got some savings. I can take care of everything else if I start the business up now or if I start it later. I can take care of all of this infrastructure, of its advertising. I can slowly build up in terms of the setup to technologize it. But from what I asked for from the subscribers would do 2 things. Number one, it would ensure that I do not have to return to the United States, not even semi-permanently. I wouldn't need to spend more than 35 days in the US. And 34 is the maximum that I want to spend. When I go, I try to spend 33 days. This way, if the flight gets delayed out, I'm still within the 35 days, 35-day window. The other thing is that, and see, because in the States, you guys are in the job market, you know what it's like. But one of the things you don't know is how easy non-black men have it. As a black heterosexual man, you have it worse than anybody else. Now, if you throw being Muslim on top of that, it's even worse. And I was black, male, heterosexual, and Muslim. My experience in the job market has been 3 and 4 out of the 4. It was never okay. It was never pretty. And I did begin to see in 2009, I began to see how it was that you can even face some of this discrimination from sisters. I saw it in Atlanta. As a student teacher, not even hitting the real job market yet. 2005, I got this job. About August, got this job. No, September. And it was one of those little office jobs, and most of the staff were sisters because this is Atlanta. There was one Karen in there. Actually, they wouldn't call her a Karen. She was more like PWT, if y'all catch my drift. So Karen, in this case, or Trailer Karen, had only worked as a nanny before. She had no education and no other experience. So she felt very insecure in this job. Now, whenever black males came in, she would do things to try to get them fired. She tried. What wound up happening was that the sisters rallied together and pulled us brothers' coats. They told me, we had a brother named Prince. I'm not going to say his last name, but we had a brother named Prince. We had another one, Elliot. They would have tried to do the same thing to Kyrie, but he'd been there too long. So she couldn't do anything to him. Therefore, the sisters didn't have to warn him. They told him, but they didn't have to warn him. There's nothing she could do to him. But they came and they told Prince, Elliot, and me, she's trying to get y'all thrown out, and we're not going to let that happen. So we're going to tell y'all what to do and what not to do, because she's focused on y'all first. If she gets rid of y'all, she's going to try it with us next. They came and helped us out. This is 2005. Even one of the sisters that had always been a bedwench, she said it herself. She'd been a gold digger all her life and had dated Wyatts all through high school. She finally married a brother. She had some of that programming in her. She was still very nice to us, and she still looked out for us along with the rest of the sisters. They were from all over, North Carolina, Alabama. I think she was from Georgia herself. Fast forward to 2009, and not even in the job market, but as a student teacher, I had a sister to whom I was assigned. She was one of the regular teachers at this school. And as a matter of fact, we were teaching history, which is right up my alley. I said, man, I'm going to work my behind off, and this is going to be great. So I did the work. I did what she said, and she still had all these corrections. And I found out later she was breaking rules. She and her assistant teacher were breaking rules at my expense. So while I was looking up to her and looking forward to working with her and learning from her, seeing her as a sort of professional mother figure, she was looking at me as competition to remove. And I was not having that. Guess who pulled my coattail to that? My professor, a white lady professor who didn't even seem interested in men, if you catch my drift, came one day. The teacher and the assistant teacher got her in the hallway, started telling her all what was wrong with me. And I knew some of it was true, but I had asked for feedback on that before. And then she pulled me off to the side in the library and said, now I had to listen to them to let them say what they had to say. But I'm going to tell you what's really going on, Black. Each of them, single, not only mothers, but single grandmothers. You're not the first one to face this, and you ain't the last. Matter of fact, somebody else is going through this right now. She told me they are used to two kinds of Black men, and you're not either one. They're used to Black men that talk and don't know what they're talking about, and they're used to Black men who know and don't talk about it. And she pointed to the best student in the class, young brother. One of us. He was one of those scholar athletes. He later on got a scholarship to go to Georgia Tech, I believe. He didn't know I saw him from a distance, but I did. But I was proud of him. I couldn't reach him to tell him. But during that time, here he was in his high school, and he had to be called on to answer, but he knew the answers. He knew his stuff, but he didn't say too much. And then the assistant teacher would bring her students in for the class in which they would both teach because they were special ed. And all the bros in that class didn't know much, but were always talking. And that's what they both had become acquainted with and used to. Both of them. It was my job to know and to teach it, and they weren't used to that. And it was my professor that was not, she wasn't black, she wasn't a man, and I don't even think she was into men organically. And she had to pull my coat to this. But the way she explained it, I really had to sit up and give her the benefit of the doubt. And I could not assume that she was just trying to be divisive, because she was sitting up telling me other things that they said that she was not there to witness them saying. She told me, if you do what they say, they are still going to criticize you if what you're going through is what I've seen others going through. And my jaw dropped, because that's exactly what had happened. She said to me, I'm going to come back one of the days this next week, and I'm going to see, I'm just going to pop up, and I'm going to see if what they say is truth or not. And she said, when I pop up, I'm not only surprising you, I'm surprising them too. And so I said to her, well, look, here's the deal. I know the days that I'm going to have to teach the majority of the lesson, so I'll give you those days. This way, you can even plan when is the best time to pop up. She popped up when I expected, which is fine. I still prepared for the other days. When she came in, I was teaching a lesson. I was by myself, and I was involving the students like we're taught to do. It wasn't just lecture. And when the assistant teacher came back late, the assistant teacher said, Mr. Mind, what are we doing? She wasn't supposed to have to ask, because she was supposed to be there from the beginning. If not her, then the main teacher was. My professor pulled me to the side later after I was done with the lesson during the break, and she said, okay, Black, here's the deal. It's exactly what I thought it was. Exactly. They were not supposed to be out of the room, leaving you there alone. That assistant teacher's students are special ed. She really was not supposed to leave you alone with special ed students. She did it anyway. They're using you to do their job so they have extra break time, and that is not allowed. This actually counts in your favor and not against you. What they're saying can only be true because of the lack of support that you're getting. They're setting you up. And they tried to use me to set you up, but that doesn't work. I later found out that the other Black male, who was not ADOS, he's Ghanaian. He might be a U.S. citizen now, but he's a Ghanaian brother, was going through the same thing. So when Boom Shika and Bon Quisha start with that stuff, it really doesn't matter your nationality. It matters if you're Black. Your nationality determines your culture, which may determine how far they think they can get away with it, but it doesn't really determine it even that much. Because see, I've had homeboys from Liberia. The Ghanaian guy and I, we had the same friends from Liberia. Our Liberian homeboys, our Liberian mutual friends, had been dating sisters and finding out at times what it was like. One had been abused. The other one had been attacked. It's the same thing, really. Both of them dealt with physical confrontation from sisters, and both of them were very muscle-bound and muscular. Too strong for this stuff. What's going on, Simeon? I hope you heard that shout out that I gave you. So, and that brings me back to the point, because I said I'm giving shouts out to the donors. And the reason I shouted these donors out is because, see, when they've done this, this helps me to not only pay the salaries of the employees of the business that I plan to start in the third nation, and by the way, the amount that it would take is now going down per subscriber. And I'm going to update you all on that. It's about, the only thing I can request, see, it's about, and I'll put it in the chat, it's about $3.72 per subscriber. Hold on. I'm typing in this chat is a little bit slow. You all can probably hit a keyboard, but right now I've got so many windows open that everything is slowed down. Plus, I think as well that because this one doesn't have a fan, that's also a problem. I'm gonna close out some of these windows though. See, I don't need Zoom. Don't need that. All right, now we're getting somewhere. It's faster now. All right, so when you all send anything, it goes to help me not only not have to go back to that job market that you guys are facing. And if you haven't been in another job market, you don't know how bad it is that you're facing. You see, the reason I know that it really is bad is because I've been abroad. It's just like Austin Holloman told you all that the mating market where you are is that bad because he went abroad and saw the difference. It's the same thing for me with the job market. I went abroad and I saw the difference. As a matter of fact, being a black heterosexual male here is a plus. You know why? We tend to relate to people in other cultures a bit better. We know that when we go abroad, we have to obey the rules of where we're going. This is something that people, anyone who has multiple experiences with multiple Americans, if you catch my drift, comes to understand. They realize this. There have been people who have worked with South Africans of Dutch origin. They've worked with Americans of Dutch and British and German and French. You get the drift, you know, those origins. And they've worked with usins, whether it's from South Africa or from the States, from the Caribbean, from the UK. And we tend to understand that when we go somewhere else, their house, their rules. This is not something they have to tell us. And sometimes if you get into a discussion about race with them, they'll point that out. That's how I know what I'm talking about. I had a police officer here back when I lived in the other city. He saw one of the South Africans of Dutch origin. They call themselves Boers, by the way. So if I use that term, that's not a pejorative. Even though I have a right to use pejoratives for them, I'm going to use what they call themselves. He saw one of the Boers with shorts on that were too short. And he asked me, who is that man? And I started ratting everything. I said, his name is, first name was, yeah, I remember his whole name. He's dead now, so I'll say it. I said, yeah, his name is David Ustias. I'm just ratting to the police officer. It was a chance for me to practice Arabic. Yeah, he's from South Africa. His origin is Dutch. He doesn't think that anybody else is equal to his people. He doesn't think he has to obey the rules when the person's darker than him, giving him those rules. The officer said to me, if you give him a warning and he obeys that warning, we will not come back and arrest him. I said, I'll give him a warning. If he obeys it, I won't bother him. If he disobeys it, I'll come back and tell you. I gave him a warning. I passed the warning on to David the next morning on the bus. David started interrupting. Well, the football teams wear short shorts. And it's like, yeah, they're playing football. But the thing is, it's still, the law was still the same even when they do it on national TV. But keep in mind, you're just doing this when it's cold outside for no good reason. And just like the women have limits to what they can expose in public, so too do the men. And you darn near had your nuts hanging out. Now, I'm not the cop. I don't make the rules. I'm telling you what he said. He's giving you a warning. He said, if nobody catches you with them pants on like that again, or with them shorts on like that again, ain't nobody gonna bother you. That I passed the warning on. And I had to interrupt him several times just to finish that sentence, because you know how they get. And the Boers tend to be very right-wing, and you know how right-wing white folks get. Yeah, I said it. You know, cutting you off and then telling you not to cut them off. That's the tactic, and that's what this guy did. He celebrated when Mandela passed away, and I felt a sense of relief when he passed away. He's gone now. I only feel sympathy for his wife. She was an excellent person and an excellent teacher, and they only kept his country behind on the job because she was with him teaching on the lady side. They said this in front of me. The project manager and his secretary discussed openly in front of me in the office how they were keeping him because of her. They said that if Vicky wasn't good, John would have been gone. When Vicky resigned, they told John, you fit the guck out and bounce out with her. He said, well, can I stay a little longer? And they said, hell no, you can't stay longer. We've been waiting on you to go. We just didn't want to split you up from your wife. That's the only reason we kept you behind. Because he didn't feel he had to obey anybody's rules if the person making the rules was darker. This is something that people know. I only know this because I've been out abroad, living abroad and working abroad. And when you guys help out like this, I get to stay. And not only that, but it also allows me to show you guys in the future more things live. Now, I probably am not going to put my real name on here, but we could easily get to a point in which I could afford to put my face and show you what the business is and how it helps. Because see, the business is also going to be utilized to raise some funds to help when people want to transition into the area in which I'm living. Richie Mack, the travel OG, is doing this. He was willing to help Austin to acclimate himself to Thailand for the length of time that Austin chose to stay. Austin is now back in Brazil. I think he's in Rio, but he might go to Bahia next week, Salvador de Bahia. By the way, Austin, if you hear this, please tell me. jet.black.core@gmail.com is my email address. Austin, if you hear this, let me know when you're about to go live. I want to see that when you are in Salvador de Bahia. And I'd love to see it live if I'm awake during those hours. And I mean that from the bottom of my black heart and from the depths of my black mind. I think Austin is going to be helping people that want to go to Brazil. And if they're in the same city as him, he'll probably help them to transition. Now, most people traveling will probably not need much financial help, but they would need some instruction and somebody to go with them as a guide so that they don't lose everything that they do have. That's important. And that takes time. So when you guys have helped like you have, you are buying time that I can use to help someone. So even if I'm not able to help you back directly, you are going to be helping someone else. That's the only reason I even feel comfortable coming to you guys and asking. Now, if I mess up and if I get the gig that for which I just had an interview a little while ago, then depending on what they offer, then of course the amount that I would need to ask for would go down even more. And if it does, I'm going to keep on updating you all. And if you can't give, it's okay. That's fine. That's okay, because sometimes you just don't have it. We all go through that at some point. But what I wanted y'all to know is that if I'm going to ask for anything, I'm going to be as transparent as I can be without compromising the privacy of my family. Now, my own, I may be willing to compromise. I'm not going to compromise my family's privacy. That's not up for negotiation. There's no amount of money that can buy that. I'm not going to tell anyone my son's name or my daughter's names or put their pictures up, nor my wife's name, nor her image. Or even my ex-wives for that matter. Not doing that. Definitely not going to expose my parents or my brother, even after they pass away, which hopefully will not be anytime soon, Lord, please. But in terms of like showing just who I am, what I look like, and what my business is going to be, yeah. Matter of fact, I'm going to be filming some things around here without myself in them so that you can see the safety in which you have helped me to stay. Because there are many places that are much safer than the States. Where I live is absolutely safe. There are a bunch of cars that are parked around right now, and people have not locked their doors. I haven't locked my car door as a matter of habit in a long time. The only reason that I lock my outside door is because it automatically locks when it closes. That's the only reason. You almost wonder why they even build locks on doors at this point. Truth be told, locks on many doors have more to do with children than they have to do with intruders. An intruder in this country is more likely to scale the fence of your house to try to sneak a visit to your daughter because he likes her and has a crush on her than he is to try to scale the fence to your house because he wants to burgle. Home intrusions and invasions are darn near non-existent. They're so they're so rare that when one did happen and the son of the house killed the intruder because his wife and his sister and mother were in the house too. So he killed the intruder in self-defense. He still had to do time for it. Now, I don't think they killed him, but he still had to do time for it because there was doubt as to whether this was even an intruder. That's how safe the nation is. When something like this does happen, people are really not even sure how to handle it. Even in Riyadh, you might have your car stolen in Riyadh because a teenager wants to go joyriding before anything else, and that's if you leave your keys in the ignition. The people routinely have their cars parked and the doors aren't locked. This is common. The safety here is top notch. And see, in Thailand, Austin told us it's very safe. He mentioned that. And so you're actually helping. It's not just me. Anything that you all send to support, you're helping these folks to stay in safer environments, because you all know winter's already there where you guys live, literally and figuratively. It's not a secret. Everybody knows that it's already winter there. And you all are seeing in the U.S. cities, you guys are talking about how many homeless people you can see. But I also know that it can be a struggle to not become one of them. And this is part of the reason why when you see them, you might feel a sense of anxiety, even though you may not discuss it. You feel that sense of anxiety because you know that the job market, as much as you have done well and reached the middle class, and as much as you have thrived against all odds, you do understand still that the environment wants most of us to be in that position. Even if sisters lead in being evicted right now, some people are still upset that it ain't us with them. I'm not really going to ask you guys just for me, because what I'm going to say is that for some of you, you may not have it, but it doesn't necessarily have to be just me. I would like to see Edward Allen Anderson get more support. I would like to see BGS get more support. The truth be told, what is most important in terms of when I ask for anything, and I try to, like I said, I try to make it very small for every individual because that's what's easy, but it can go a long way. I would like to see I'd like to see the artist, young brother that designed those hoodies and those shirts. I put the links up in my first video about UBMPT, Union of Black Male Passport Travelers. I put those links up. I would like to see people buy those things because even though the prices are up, it's because they're new. They have to sell a certain amount before he can afford to go down in price per unit. It's like that with many things. Teespring's going to take theirs off the top, but they're willing to lower the percentage that they take if you sell enough units. I love to see that. What I'm really asking is for us to support each other, not just y'all to come to my aid. And this is something I was saying back when I still had the job and got those checks every month. I was still saying this. And another thing is that this is going to sound a bit hateful. But, oh yeah, Chaos Rain, I see your question. Right now, I'm using my wife's Huawei tablet. I'm using that one, so it's not quite as fast as the other laptops, but generally speaking, I will either use a Dell if I'm here, or if I go outside, like to a coffee shop or something, and I'll use an Asus laptop. So generally speaking, this is very important. The flip side of what I'm asking you, gentlemen, is to not support new ladies in this space financially. That's the flip side. I am asking you guys, when they're new, don't hit the super chat, don't hit the Cash App. I'm asking you all to do that. Is it out of hatred? No. Actually, like I said, I have a bias in favor of Chantel Simone. There are 3 reasons why Chantel Simone doesn't have a man vetting her for marriage right now that we know of. 3 reasons. 1, she and I are of 2 opposite religions. Not opposite, but we're not of the same religion. Number 2, we don't live even near each other. Number 3, I met my wife first, and there ain't nobody that can compete with her. That's the honest to God truth. I finally found in a wife what my dad found in my mother. And that took me into my 40s to find her. That's no shade against Chantel. But even despite a bias that I have in her favor, because I think she means well, I really do. And I really appreciate that maturity, even being as cute as she is, because we know in the West, and Jamaica's included in this, we know in the West, when you're cute and you're a woman, you have no incentive to mature psychologically and as a character. We know this because we done, like I said, what's the one thing that we men have done wrong? We made it too easy. Everything else falls under the umbrella of us making it too easy. Everything else we do wrong. Even when a guy cheats, he's making his ding-a-ling too easy. And when another guy simps and spends so much, he's making his wallet too easy. Even in those cases. So it really did take some sort of maturity in her for her to start to admit to having made errors in the first place. So if there was someone I was going to say, go ahead and just hurry up and send some of them money, if there was going to be that. Now, defense is one thing when they're attacked by the hyenas. But if I was going to say send money, it would be to her. But you know what? She's new. Crimson Q is one that's been doing this for a while. And she didn't start collecting anything until 2 years ago. Now, I knew she was doing this. I knew about her 4 years ago. No, actually, I knew about her in 2017. So now it's 5 years, and I think when I first heard of her. But I didn't follow her that much. So she's been at it a while. That's when I understand when she collects both from A Game and from YouTube and from subscribers and listeners. I understand why she collects, because she's been at this for a while and she's even changed stances in order to evolve and mature. She used to agree with Angry Man that if you were a so-called non-select guy, which is most guys, your job was to raise other men's children. Your job was to pay these women to play with other men, to feed the children that they breed with other men. That was, in fact, something that he and she said. She abandoned that. I don't know if she ever retracted the statement, but she quit saying it and she started saying, in a nutshell, the opposite. I understand when she collects, but I am asking you, gentlemen, that outside of her and anyone else that's really been at this for a long time, don't support, financially speaking, don't support the ladies that are in this space. We support them with the views, like, share, and subscribe, and all that other stuff. And if you're going to support, it should be very little. I'm not saying it's because I want all of that money, although I do. Of course, I like money like anybody else. But my reason for saying that is frankly because we need to support each other. Trust you me, man. 3 years doing this. Well, I got really active in 2019. So about 3 years and some months ago. 3 years doing this, I didn't know that I was going to be in between gigs now. And even then, I do have savings, so I'm not indigent. My biggest worry is having to go back to the States. That's because then my savings would vanish. Absolutely. If I get to stay out of the States and I get to stay employed, then all I would need to ask for from you guys would probably be about $2.50 per subscriber. And then that would be enough on top of what I'd make to funnel into this fund that I'm going to use to pay the salaries of the employees, because that's one thing I want to guarantee. And one of the reasons is this: if the business slows down, even if it fails, and I pay the employees, they're going to ask, if it slowed down, how did you manage to pay us with such advance notice before you close everything down? And I would be able to say to them, Black folks did it. Black Americans and other Black folks who live amongst us in the States did this. That's one of the reasons. One is, of course, it's important if you employ someone, it's important to have their pay ahead of time. That's just being responsible. But the other reason is because I want to be able to give us as a whole collective credit for it. But there's one other thing too, and I'm only saying this now because I don't want to forget to say it later. Before I go back to talking about these women that are in the space and our support of them, financially speaking, our support, I want to say one other thing about whatever it is that anyone does send and what I'm going to use it for, because I need to be transparent. The environment to which I would be moving, inshallah, has both traditional areas and more modernist areas that are sympathetic to feminism. Yes, I would be putting this to fight feminism. And I would be supporting those who fight feminism to help them to get off to a good start. A little seed, though, some advertising for them. That's what I would be doing. Now, would I be red pilling the youth? Absolutely. Outside of business hours, of course. Yeah, I would. Absolutely, I would. No shame in it. I'll do it here, just outside of class hours. I'll do the same thing here. As a matter of fact, in Saudi, there are more and more bilingual males that are becoming red pill. They know the jargon like body count and things like that in English. The bilingual ones know what these things mean. The bilingual ones know about Kevin Samuels. The bilingual ones know that Will Smith had to slap Chris Rock because of a joke about his wife doing something that was kind of odd, and the whole haircut thing, and that he never laid a finger on the man that actually stepped out of bounds with his wife's consent and never laid a hand, not even to shake his wife. They know about this. Now, this was something I was able to afford to do on my own. But I did want you all to know that, yes, whatever y'all send does go to spread the message outside of work hours as well, or the results of what you send. Because in all honesty, once I reach that target, I would say to everybody, thank you. The cup is full. I appreciate that. I got enough now. I'm about to get started. Now, the next thing I'm going to say is because I said that I was going to talk something about a little bit more about these ladies in the space, and that includes Pearl, just Pearly Things. One more thing about Pearly Things that I began to notice was that people forgot what she said to Sarah Garvey about the normality of George Washington being a slave owner during his time. We can have all these discussions. Doesn't matter how many discussions that we have about her if we forget that she's right about gender, but like many conservative whites, she is dead wrong about race. And it's not something that she even means any harm in being. That's the other thing. Yes, Jawad is right. Jawad said Crimson Cure brought that up as well. Yes, she did. Crimson Cure even said, Crimson Cure pretty much said, even if just Pearly means well, there's a limit to how much she can do. And see, when it comes to women being in the space, we're going to have debates about it. There are guys that listen to me that say none of them should be in the space. There are other guys that are going to listen and say, we can give them a chance. I'm not going to trust most of them. I'm one of those that says, let each one of them show who they are. And they're going to. And that's one of the reasons I say, don't financially incentivize women to join the space. Don't do it. That's one of the things I've been saying. Support them every way except for financially. Let them figure it out on their own, the way that you and I would have to if we started a channel and we don't have tits. Let them figure that out. Crimson did. She did it without making much money up until 2 years ago. She put the time in. And even then, a lot of her dough comes from an endorsement that she has. And that's good. That's smart. She plays the ad. Hell, I want to try A Game. I don't think they deliver out here, but I want to give A Game a chance. Absolutely. Take enough A Game based on the way they advertise it. I take enough A Game. My wife might be coming to me limp and talk about, you need a second wife. I'm tired. Hey, look, I want to try just because. But she actually went through that. She figured something out and got a deal. She got at least some of it out the mud before the rest of us chipped in, which by that point made sense. But see, Just Pearly Things has a right to observe what she observes as long as she's not lying and making up stuff. And we haven't caught her doing that. If she got this coach fired, the chances are that in the Chicago area, to get a black coach fired, she had to go to a black authority figure to report him. And she did say that she got this, she got evidence from other women before she did anything. And really, it boiled down to the fact that she didn't want that guy to teach her sister. It boiled down to that. So as far as her targeting him just because he's a black male, well, I doubt that that's the case. Do I think she had the right to do that? No, I don't think so. I don't think anybody white has the right to complain about anything anybody black does in America. Now, that sounds racist coming from me, but it's actually anti-racist. However, I do think that she had to go, walaikum salam, Artzak, apekabar. Sayarin dukamu, apekabar kilowarga. So I don't think that this is something that any of them have a right to do. But I think, again, she didn't do this on her own. I'm sure she had to go to someone black in order to get a black man fired for something he did with evidence. So if you got to do that, she did it as right away as possible. I can't imagine her being in Chicago, getting a black educational figure fired without the consent of someone black that looked at the evidence. Not in Chicago. However, nonetheless, we do have to keep in mind that no matter how many black men she dates or screws, there's certain things she's not going to be able to see because they're just not trained to see it that way. Sarah Garvey, when it came down to looking down on George Washington, was absolutely right. What's the reason? Because by the time George Washington was even alive, by the time he was born, which was in fact before the independence of the US, obviously, slavery had been targeted against our race. It was no longer something universal in between most groups of people anymore. Slavery had been redefined in the Americas. Not just in the US, but in the Americas. Black slave. And it was so effective that there was a point in time when even the Arabs began to utilize this in their language. That was a problem. To this day, Arabs call black folks slaves, and they don't even mean any harm when they do it. I still don't let them off the hook. But they do that. They don't call us slaves because I'm American or because my friends are from Nigeria or because my wife is from Somalia. That's not why. It's because we're black. That's it. Black slave. Even the black Indians, they don't call slaves. Black, you are of the race of black people. They call you slave. That is until you get up in their face and call them a terrorist and dare them to do something about it. Then they learn their lesson, to be honest. They tend to figure it out when they realize that you're teaching them a lesson and you're not saying it out of hatred. They tend to get it. Yeah, that's wrong. We shouldn't be using slave. So they're more corrigible than your average Western white. But George Washington was born into a system in which slave meant black. And that was really what was wrong with it. That was worse than anything else. Plus, it had already begun to be dehumanizing in certain colonies in the Caribbean, moving up into the south of what would later come into the United States and what was southern colonies at that time. The work in the Carolinas was brutal. They started off with indigo on the coast, and that work was brutal. So she wanted to say, well, that was normal. And that's true. But she didn't understand that nobody who is lighter skinned, forget white, just no one that is not black is ever ready to normalize slavery against their people and them being singled out for it. To normalize slavery as a historical event and phenomena is, in fact, correct. It was normal. That's true. But to normalize singling out a race because they are of that race for slavery is not normal. It absolutely is not. It wasn't okay when people used to raid the Slavic people from whom the word slave even came into English. It wasn't okay to single them out to raid for slavery. That was wrong too. But that by extension, that means that it was wrong to turn around and single us out for slavery. And that's the part she skipped over. If we really want to get on her about something, that's something to get on her about. Even if you don't hate her, that's something to get on her about, to teach her, listen, you can normalize slavery as a historical phenomenon. But Pearl, you cannot normalize singling out a race for slavery, especially when that race did not identify itself as a race to begin with, because it's the original race. See, that's where we slipped up. Our memories are short. Crimson Cure dealt with it at that time. F her opinions and feelings about George Washington. Screw that. One of the things that we're all going to have to deal with when we're dealing with the white men of their manosphere, because we are different, or when we're dealing with the white women, we're going to have to face the fact that they may be right about gender and they're still wrong about race. When it comes to the racial conflict in Europe, in Africa, or in the West, or in Asia, even if it's just a conflict of words like it is here where I live, when it comes to these racial conflicts, black is right, white is wrong. It's that simple, because we never started a racial conflict in the history of mankind. We've not been any more tribally conflicting than any other races, because most races are multiple tribes and languages. Asians are not all one people. Asians don't become one people until their second or third generation, well, first generation born in the US, or let's say first generation growing up in the US. Even then, they're not completely one people. The Vietnamese American kid knows he's different from the Korean American kid, but they're willing to look out for each other when they have a common enemy. But they know their parents ain't friends. They know they're not expected to marry each other. They know this. Especially if the guy is Vietnamese and the girl is Korean. They know that. They have the hierarchy. But now their kids can just be Asian. This is what happens with race in general. I'm going to tell you straight. You think Colombians and Mexicans always get along? Absolutely not. No, they don't. Colombians don't even sound like Mexicans when they speak Spanish. They can hear a sharp difference in between each other's Spanish. Will they cooperate with each other when they have a common enemy in the United States? It makes sense that they would. Are their cultures very similar? The similarities between their cultures are probably more recent, having to do with popular culture. But for the most part, no. And so they want to turn around and justify singling out a race that did not even identify itself as a race. Because think about it, of all races, we're the least familiar with the concept of race anyway, historically and currently. We're the ones that have to ask, why is it everybody else has it in for us? We have to ask that question. Other people don't have to ask that question. Arabs may have to ask what the hatred is about, but even Arabs understand why many people don't want to marry us. Arabs even have that. They think it's an instinctive understanding. They don't realize that they learn this culturally and subconsciously. They think it is a human instinct. And everybody tends to think this way. Or not everybody, but a lot of people tend to think this way. Southeast Asians are an exception, but just Pearly Things, she can be checked about this even without hatred. And this is where we slipped up. We forgot what she said to Sarah Gordon. When you're dealing with someone white in this space of either gender, whether it's a sincere woman, a chameleon, or whether it's a red pill white guy or a purple pill white guy, one of the things we're going to have to face is that they don't understand the fundamentals of black, non-black conflict. It's always the non-blacks that started it. If it's about race, if it's about something else, maybe not. Ethiopia at one time, back when it was called Abyssinia, colonized Yemen. But at that time, both of the populations were about the same shade. They had more linguistic differences than they did genetic differences at the time this happened anyway. They were culturally different. You DNA test any Yemeni or any East African, and each one has the other one's DNA in them to this day. People didn't realize that. But that wasn't even so much about race at that time. But you fast forward to, and that's the time when Ethiopia was the aggressor. But even then, that was imperialism. Like I said, it wasn't about race. Whenever it's been about race, it was whoever was not black that started it. Hands down. And this works even when you have conflicts in between non-black people. It always follows this pattern. And this is what we're able to look at them and check them and say, see, you can understand this about gender, but you can't get it about race. So what if we have a victim mentality that you don't like? F you. You have a victim mentality when it comes to gender. Men have it hard. Yeah, we do. Men have it hard. You're right. Our race has it hard. If it's a victim mentality, good. You don't like hearing it? Good. You need to hear more of it. When it comes to gender, you can be right and still be wrong about race. And that's what most non-black people are when it comes down to the arguments. Southeast Asians tend to be an exception. I got to hand it to them. A lot of times they're very egalitarian, even when they bleach their skin. They tend to be very fair despite their use of skin bleach. As a matter of fact, I know one man that's in the chat right now who told his wife, don't you use that skin bleach, get rid of it. Told her to throw it out. This is the real conflict. It's not so much about her being a white woman in the space yet, unless she turns out to be a chameleon. Then it's going to be about her being a chameleon. And I'm not going to lie. She should not be able to buy the equipment in the studio that easily. This early. It's not something she should be able to do. Until the day, gentlemen, that you can get on there and show your face with your facial hair and no titties and get the same dough as easily, as early, and as quickly. None of them should be able to. It's not about my envy. It's really about what's fair to you. And I want to explain something else too. S. Rogers actually redeemed much of the manosphere. You had a few that were staying on the manosphere, doing things like sending 1,500 US over the course of 3 days to one of the ladies that's in this space, to Chantel Simone. I talked about that earlier. And like I stated, this is despite my bias in her favor. I'm saying this. I don't even blame her until the day she turns out to be a fake or changes colors or something. I mean, figuratively speaking, until that day, I'm not going to blame her. No. You know me. Be fair. Let them show themselves. Let them show their tails before you start to call them out for something. Walaikum salam, Charles Irby. Walaikum salam, Jawad. You've heard me say this multiple times. No, don't call someone a chameleon just because she's a woman. No, be fair. Let them show themselves like what Melanie King did. She couldn't hide it. Chameleons can't, you have to remember, chameleons cannot, just like a leopard cannot change their spots, a chameleon cannot keep the same color consistently. Remember that, gentlemen. Nobody can hide who they really are all the time. Not me, none of you, and none of these ladies. Nobody white, nobody black. No leopard and no chameleon can consistently hide who and what they are all the time. Yeah, Jawad, you asked just as I was saying it. I know. She wanted to switch up, not even hatefully. She just wanted to try to scare Austin with things that actually were true. She didn't make up a near one of them laws she talked about that I know of. But why was she telling him about these laws when her ex-husband is a passport black man from Zambia or Zimbabwe? What she's really saying is, stay here where it's difficult. Well, we made it difficult. Because remember, when she had that interview with Austin, she already confessed to a white guy on her show that no woman brings peace, not even she brings peace despite being on men's side. Remember that. She was telling a white guy, well, your chastity doesn't mean anything to a woman. And, being a wounded man doesn't mean anything to a woman. We don't say, oh, let me be the woman that doesn't do that. You guys do that. We women say, oh, no. If the last woman did you wrong, I'm going to do you wrong, and you better not correct me any more than you did her. She said this before she showed Austin. And even then, it was more like the mask slipping off more than anything. The real time she showed herself, Jawad, was when a fellow named It's That Bad, that was his screen name, It's That Bad, came on to her show. And he asked her one question, not out of hatred, but he asked to know, What was the reason you did not attend Kevin's funeral? The funny thing is, I later heard that she actually had a good reason for not attending. She didn't even state what that was. She went to attacking him, and she attacked him even after he got off the screen. She called him Angry Inch. Went straight to talking about his junk size. That man never put his genitals on. He wasn't visible from the chest down. She talking about that man junk size. You just mad, Angry Inch, because I'm never going to sit on it. No, not really. That's not why that man was mad. Yep, that was him. And that's when she really showed who she is. If she was upset by the question, that's fine. She still needed to control herself. She didn't. He logged off the screen. Somebody else came on the screen. She was still going off on him. Like he had disrespected her or something, or like he had put his junk in her face. Sorry for going on mute, guys. I had to sneeze, and I didn't want to bust you guys' eardrums out. You guys ever heard a gorilla sneeze? And here's the thing, Charles Irby, if you never trusted Melanie King, you were still very fair, because I never saw or heard you write or say anything against her until she did this. See, we've been fair. But it's a shame that Melanie does not have to work. After this happened, what did we do wrong? We did not stop supporting her. I mean, most of you listening to me did stop, but we never called for the manosphere as a whole to stop it. Nobody took the names down of guys that send her super chats. Now, Cash Apps, you may not know about it unless she gives a shout out. And that's one reason I was hesitant to give shouts out to my donors. And that's one reason why I still am not willing to give the whole names. I appreciate you guys from the bottom of my black heart, the depths of my black mind, and from the inside of my black wallet too, believe that. But one reason I don't give the first and last name of anybody is largely because I don't want people coming later on and saying, we're going to cancel you because you sent some dough to Black Mind. Especially if you send in 500 like the autodidact did. And we're going to cancel you. And if we find out where you work because we got your real name, we're going to call your boss. No, I'm not going to have somebody go through that because of me. That's not fair. Hell, my platform is right. I'm not always right in every fact that I try to state, but what I'm standing for is absolutely right. Men and women treating each other fairly. And right now, I don't have to tell men to treat women fairly. I mean, is it necessary? Of course it is, morally speaking. But nobody has to tell men this in the West. This is known. We make mistakes out of things like ignorance. We make mistakes because we don't know women. We don't understand them. They give us mixed signals. We're trying to figure them out. That's where we screw up. They're treating us unfairly because they can, because we make it easy, because they hate us, because to them, that's what we deserve, because they're mad that we have outside plumbing and libidos, despite the fact they got libidos too. They're mad because it's easier for us to bust a nut than it is for them to. They never stop to think maybe I'm just too complicated. They never stop. They don't consider that for 1 second, but then they look at us in our simplicity and they get mad about our simplicity. You question them, well, that's the way I was made, I can't help it. Then they turn around and question us and want to, in a sense, blame God for making us this way, or blame us for being made the way we were. So even though I believe in equal treatment and fair treatment, I don't have to tip the scales and the balance up and down and up and down. It's only down on one side and up on the other. That's why I have to be one-sided in this. That's why we all got to be one-sided in this. And since we need to be a bit more one-sided, one of the things we need to start doing is finding out who it is that's sending this dough to these ladies, especially chameleons, and cancel them first. Somebody who sends dough to Melanie now and their name shows up, if you get the real name, fine. If you don't, take the screen name. And we need to have this blasted all across the manosphere. This for the mucker simping, he's sending this big amount to Melanie after she called that dude Angry Inch. Yeah, that's what we need to be doing. And someone in the sense Doe to Melanie needs to be treated worse than if they send Doe to Chantel, or if they if they send it to Crimson, there doesn't need to be any penalty because Crimson has consistently not changed colors. And when she's changed something that she said, it was more favorable to us in the end. This right here. It starts with the validation, guys. Pay attention to what Phantom Clutch just said on the screen. Pay attention to that. It starts with validation. Girl, you fine at a mother cuss word. Oh, you so pretty. That right there. Oh, you attract. That right there is the problem. That's where it begins. The money comes later. We need to make them work for validation, because if we're going to make them work for validation, then they're going to have to work. By extension, they're going to have to work for ding-a-ling and money. And a lot of us don't think that we can make it work for ding-a-ling. No. Men can. It happens. It's been going on. Men have been making women work for ding-a-ling in certain environments. Even if it's not hard work, there are standards they got to meet just to catch some pipe. Worst case scenario, you got a lot of traditional environments in which if a woman doesn't have to work for some pipe, she still got to work for a ring and some commitment. Worst case scenario. So, gentlemen, that's about the gist of it for now. I wanted to catch up and give shouts out to the donors and remind us of what we have forgotten when it comes to just pearly things. Somehow we got so caught up in her being in the space that we forgot where she openly needed correction, whether you're going to do it with hatred or not. And I don't see a reason to do it with hatred, because she's not coming to us with hatred, but she's still coming to us with a white world racial view. And that's wrong enough right there. That's when you tell somebody, listen, talk about gender, because your views on race are wrong, and we just gonna click off if you start talking this stuff like we're all the same, or like there was really nothing extra worse about what was done to black folks in the continent and abroad in the diaspora. You start talking like that, we're just gonna turn you off, because we historically know that that's not true. It was not just the exact same. Even in some parts of the Arab and Persian world, when they enslaved whites, which they did do, and when they enslaved people of an intermediate phenotype, and when they enslaved black folks, they treated you worse the darker you were. And keep in mind, remember, the ancient Arabs were largely black, at least an admixture, and they still did this. Keep that in mind, gentlemen. Even there. So I don't let them off the hook. I don't want to blame them for anything they did not do. And that's why sometimes it seems like I'm a fence rider. But it's just because I'm trying to be careful to blame them for what they did and not blame them for what they did not. That's why it seems like that. And that's really it. But we're going to have to start telling not just pearly things. It's not because it ain't just her. There are times we're going to have to say this to others. I'm going to tell y'all right now. There's a Muslim guy, a white Iranian Muslim cat. And he'll confront feminism and liberalism and that whole agenda. He will. You start talking about race, and I mean, he'll disagree with white nationalists, but he'll say, well, there's some things we have in common. And he won't even lie about that. But when he starts talking about racial justice, or he starts talking about the victim mentality and everything, no, shuck that fit. Your people were a major part of the damn problem. Because some of the first racist poetry ever written in Arabic was not even written by Arabs. As a matter of fact, the color prejudice that we know of today did not get started in Europe. It got started, as far as we know, in the border region in between Afghanistan and Iran today by people called the Aryan. That's the place from which Hitler got the name Aryan. And it was an Afghan that told me about this. He knew the history. He said, no, they started that. Europeans didn't have a systemic cultural belief in color bias or a color hierarchy like that. You're talking about Daniel Hakikachu. I wasn't even going to say his name, but yep. Or did I just say it? I'm getting old, I'm forgetting. But yeah, I didn't see how he denigrated MLK. I'm not sure. Didn't know about that. But you know what? I go in on this dude. When it comes to talking about gender, he and I are on the same side. When he starts talking about race, he needs to fuck the shuck up. Okay, so he left the Shiaism of his parents and became a Sunni. Great. Now he needs to understand that when it comes to racial conflict, black is right, white is wrong. And that's a hard pill for people to digest. They don't even have to be white to have a hard time digesting that. He's white, not just racially, which is normal, but even psychologically. And that's why I say that when it comes to Islam, when you are white and you come into Islam, there is a type of deracialization you have to go through that black people don't need to go through. Because we're not the ones that are walking around pushing every other race away just because they're not us. This is something that is a recent phenomenon, and it is reactive. It's not always right, but it's reactive. Even other races have not done this to every race, but many races have done this to only us. Like I said, it always follows a pattern. I can go to Malaysia right now, and I'll tell you who doesn't like who, and you'll see a pattern in this. The Indians are cool with the Malay people. The Chinese look down on everybody else. Now, the Malay people don't look down really on anybody at all. But they're looked down upon by the Chinese. But let me help you to understand that pattern a bit more. Because the Malay don't look down on the Indians or even on us Africans. However, the Indians look down on Africans or black folks in general, and that includes African Americans or African Caribbean people. Do you see a pattern? You understand now, gentlemen? This is really what we're going to have this conflict with folks like, Just Pearly Things and her male counterparts. Many of them who don't even hate us still are not capable of wrapping their mind around the concept that their ancestors were subhuman, rat bastard sheeses of pit. And that if there's any justice in the afterlife, which I do believe, their ancestors are burning not only because their God was a human being that did not ask to be worshipped as a God, but on top of that, because they oppressed others or they were okay with it. If there's any justice, they're roasting right now, not even in hell, but just in their graves, they're getting roasted and tormented before they even get resurrected. This is a hard thing for them to understand. Meanwhile, they want to tell us, if we're black, they want to say to us, well, you have to accept that your ancestors that were Christian. I mean, I'm talking about just the Muslims amongst many of them will say, well, you have to accept that your ancestors that were Christian, they have to be going through torment in the grave because of what they believed. Okay, well, okay, if that's in the faith, then that means yours weren't worth a hill of beans either. That's really what we're going to have a conflict. That's coming. I don't know how many of us are actually prepared for it, Muslim or not, but that's a conflict that's coming. And I, for one, I'm prepared. Even if every black person voted one day and said black mind ain't black no more, I'm still prepared to tell them, no. Your ancestors were pieces of crap. Whatever our ancestors were, good, bad, in between, a mix, backsliding, inconsistent, whatever the case, whatever they were, one thing they didn't get to be was oppressors. It wasn't an option for them. So how are they going to be punished for that? Yours were oppressors. And that's the first thing that when Allah created creation, he forbade himself from doing. He forbade himself from oppression. And he forbade oppression for his creation. What this means is that the Lord himself prioritized justice. This is a teaching in my religion. He prioritized justice. And they don't seem to have that understanding when it starts to come down to darker skinned people. In this regard, many of them actually follow the Hindus, because white supremacy is a part of the Hindu religion. It's built in, even if they don't know it. You want to know where we're really going to have a conflict with not just pearly things, but others? There it is right there. And they don't have to hate you to stand on what they're going to stand on. They're just going to be trying to look out for themselves. And by extension, their ancestors, because they're a part of their ancestors, and the ancestors make up a part of who they are now. We're the ones that are willing to look at our own ancestors and try to analyze them objectively. And even then, I'm not talking about the pro-blacks. I'm talking about genuine pro-blacks. And I'm also talking about those of us in this space here. We're genuinely trying to objectively analyze. And we're not always right ourselves. A lot of us don't like to read any more than anyone else does, or maybe just a little bit more. We're still in the process of learning history. But many of us in this space try not to over-romanticize our ancestors or blame them for things that they didn't do. So let's take a look at what Charles Irving is schooling us on right now. Said he's the father of liberalism. And frankly, you know what? I don't find that to be the, I'm with you. I don't find that MLK was the father of some sort of liberalism. I never heard anything up. If any, you know what? If MLK had ever laughed at the idea of a black pastor sexually assaulting a black woman, either it would be because MLK did not believe that it was true, or he didn't laugh about that. Because one thing about MLK, and mind you, keep in mind, MLK and I do not agree on religion, or did not agree. But MLK did not believe that oppression was okay. He was pretty consistent on that. I got to give credit where it's due. Here we go. He said MLK is the spirit of SJW. There were Muslim immigrants in the comments saying MLK was a coward. La'nat Allah alayhum. May Allah curse them for saying this. I'm not going to ask Allah to correct him, guide them, none of that. Shuck that fit. May Allah curse them for saying this stuff. Even if they really believe it. Because if they really believe it, it means they didn't read history. For them to say this, it means that they're just entirely too comfortable with tearing down anybody black and upholding somebody white, regardless of religion. That's what that means. These are the same ones, Charles, that try to sit up and say, oh, Malcolm X loved everybody when he died. But shuck that fit. Malcolm said who he loved and who he didn't. He said he would accept as a brother who would accept him as a brother, and he did not want brotherhood with those who didn't want it with him. That's what Malcolm said. So in a nutshell, people can say what they want about how wrong it is to be nationalist. In general, by default, that would be true. By default. The problem is that everybody else, with a few exceptions, has forced us to be nationalist. This is something they forced. Like I stated, the exceptions tend to, one exception I know, well, two exceptions. One, many Latin Americans that are aware and they're okay with the African origin. We might call them Afro-Latinos, we may not. It depends on how much you feel what your threshold is to be considered black, what percentage you have to have, your view. But that's one exception, if you even want to call them an exception. A lot of Latin Americans that don't have black blood that they know of, generally speaking, don't have an issue with us. And then a lot of them do when they believe in blanqueamiento and mejorando la raza, or in what they call improving the race and bleaching. Latin America itself is divided on this. The other exception, as I've stated, tends to be people from Southeastern Asia. I'll give credit where it's due when I don't agree with them. The Buddhists tend to be this way. Worshiping a statue, you know I'm not going to agree with that. But when it comes to understanding racial equality, a lot of them tend to get it. I mean, Southeast Asia is one of the rare places you can go to, even more than our own continent. It's one of the rare places a black man can go and find himself more preferred over one of them folks, the palm-colored folks, as Crimson would say. One of the Wyatts. Check this out. Phantom, my issue is not giving women validation. This is fair to a certain extent. I mean, we can validate their points. We can validate their points, and that's fine. But when we validate them in terms of aesthetics, just complimenting them on their looks, that right there is bad enough. If they take booty pics and put them on any social media platform, when we go on and hit the like button, that's validation that we got to stop doing. That right there is the wrong kind of validation. So when we say make them work for validation, the kind of validation for which we want them to work, generally speaking, is the same validation. You and I are thinking of the same for which they must work. We can validate their valid points. But validating even their looks and you don't know them, that's bad enough. That right there goes to make them as immature and as insecure, but also as arrogant as what they are. I mean, think about it. They combine insecurity with arrogance in a way that should be impossible, because these two are mutually exclusive. Yet and still, the Wicked Witch of the West can combine these two because we let them, giving us the worst of both and the best of neither. Because we let them. Just as Phantom said in here, as I've been saying, that's how we made it easy for them. Yes, Charles Irby, this is right. Mahatma Gandhi said this when he was in South Africa. He was on the African continent saying this stuff. He didn't become an activist until he realized that they weren't being treated differently enough from the Africans on whose soil his country behind was. And to this day, there are people there that are from the subcontinent that got a problem. To this day. Sorry, I sounded like Deontay Wilder when I said that. My bad. Art Zuck, absolutely right. MLK was not a coward. If you lived in now actually, Art Zuck, we call it the Jim Crow era. It was named after a man named Jim Crow. I'm not sure that he was really, I don't know if he was a real person or not, but the laws were named after some guy named Jim Crow. They didn't call it the Black Crow era. Now, I don't want anybody to blame Art Zuck for this, because English is his second language and he's still learning it. And as a matter of fact, I'm learning his language. I do want you guys to hit the share button and also to tell others to comment, because I want this to be commented on. I want my donors especially to hear this, because a lot of them might be asleep. Okay, I understand what this one means. Yeah, it was Malcolm that scared them. Neither Malcolm nor MLK were cowards, but it was Malcolm that really scared them. Malcolm X, all the Muslim immigrants in NYC refused to do the janazah Muslim funerals for Malcolm. They didn't want to be associated. The service was held in a Baptist black church. Okay, now listen. Charles said this. You can see what he said. Art Zuck asked a valid question. Is this a joke? Because it is her major offense to refuse to bury a Muslim as a Muslim. And Charles Irby had to tell him, I'm serious, I'm not kidding. Listen, Art Zuck, Charles is telling the truth. I know the same history. It was on video, actually. Malcolm X right now is buried in a Christian cemetery. Until now, and so is his wife buried next to him in a Christian cemetery, because the Muslims that were not black, not just in New York, the Muslims that were not black in the United States were not going to bury him as a Muslim in any of their cemeteries. This is not just NYC. This was pretty much throughout the states. Yeah, it was that bad. And see, Art Zuck, what happens now today in the U.S. is that many black folks, even who are Muslim, don't trust anyone that's not black anymore. We've lost that trust because this happened in the 1960s to Malcolm X after he died. But since then, most Muslims that are not black have shown a bias against us. They've shown racism. The exceptions have been your part of the world, ironically, your neighboring countries. They haven't acted this way towards us, but they don't have a big population in the United States either. And the other exception is some Latin Americans that become Muslim. Some people from Colombia, Mexico, and Dominican Republic, when they become Muslim, many Puerto Ricans, when many of them become Muslim, they don't tend to have this bias against us. So far, those are the exceptions right now. But for the most part, yeah, many of the Arabs that go to the U.S., many of the Northern Indians, the Pakistanis, the Afghans, the Iranians, they've shown bias. Not only were they colonized, but many of them looked up to whites and looked down on blacks even before colonization, despite the fact that most of the ancient Arabs were black, at least partially. Funny thing is, many Yemenis don't have this, but there are so few of them that you rarely meet them. And when you finally meet them in the U.S., generally speaking, you'll meet them after they've been acclimatized and pretty much told by other Arabic speakers, you better be biased against black folks if you want to get anywhere in life. It's sad, but they're told this and they tend to fall for it. So I've been going for a while, over an hour again. But yeah, y'all hit the share button, please, because I want my donors to know about this. I want my donors to know that I appreciated them doing this. I also want donors to know that I didn't read out full names. If I saw the full name, I didn't read them out because I don't want anybody trying to cancel them in the job market, whatever their job is. And also because I want to make this very plain to to you all, my subscribers, my audience. What I ask for from the audience in this case is not for anyone to overextend themselves, but rather a small amount from a small amount spread out amongst you, inshallah. And if it's not me, that's fine, but for somebody, that's what I'm asking for. All right, it is Fard Kifaya. Yes, it is Fard Kifaya for us as Muslims to attend the Muslim funeral. Bad things happen, and so many groups refuse to do Fard Kifaya. Yep, that's true. If many of us refuse to, now to the non-Muslims, when he says Fard Kifaya, that means that it's obligatory on the group. It means that if enough people do it, then the rest are absolved of the obligation. Then the obligation has been fulfilled if a few do it. That's what this means. So if enough of us refuse to do even these things, then the blame goes on all of us. And yes, may Allah bless Malcolm. I'm pretty sure that I'm sure that he's in an enviable position right now because so many people found out about Islam because of his efforts. I'll tell you this, Art Zuck, and Charles, and to the other Muslims in the audience, this could also maybe lift your day or lift your spirits up as you get ready to start your day. Malcolm's work extended well after his death, even in ways that we didn't know about. Number one, you all remember how he fell out with Muhammad Ali, or rather Muhammad Ali pushed him away because he said, okay, I can't be with the NOI, no more adultery being justified, and no more worshiping a man as God, or calling God a man. None of those two don't go anymore. So the thing is that even though Malcolm passed away before Muhammad Ali ever reconciled with him, Malcolm's autobiography has had an impact past his death, and it started within the next few years. See, remember Muhammad Ali was facing charges, and he had to appeal, and it went to the Supreme Court. And the Supreme Court was going to, people don't know this, but the Supreme Court was going to rule against Muhammad Ali for fighting the draft and disobeying it. They were going to say that his objection based on religion was not a valid objection because he made his religion up. That's what they were going to say. I kid you not. One of the clerks of the final judge that was going to have to give his ruling and on which the outcome was going to depend read Malcolm's autobiography, found out that there was in fact such an idea or a religious group as the NOI, and called her boss, that judge, and said, listen, we have proof that Muhammad Ali did not make up this religion that formed the basis for his conscientious objection. It existed. She didn't say it was the right religion. We don't say that. None of it. She simply said that it was a religious group that existed before Muhammad Ali or Malcolm was even born, but they became active before Malcolm or Muhammad, before their births, but they became active during their adulthood. She called her boss and told that judge that. And for legal reasons, that judge said, okay, then that means that his conscientious objection based on his religious beliefs were not made up. He actually got them from something else. Therefore, he was obeying the law when he conscientiously objected to being drafted. We cannot rule against him. And so he voted against, and that's how it was that Muhammad Ali did not have to go to prison. He got arrested, of course, but that's how he did not have to go to prison when he when he fought the draft. And he had every right to dodge it if he had chosen to do so. Based on the book that Malcolm wrote, Muhammad Ali wound up staying free. His work went on. So I'm sure that Malcolm is in an enviable position right now as far as his station in the view of the Lord Almighty. Absolutely. I mean, for one, he literally stopped bullets because of the morality of what he believed. He was abandoned by law enforcement that was supposed to protect him according to their own rules. And they admitted this. Somebody recently confessed on a deathbed that actually law enforcement was participatory in his assassination, along with the NOI. His main killer lived free for the rest of his natural life. Everybody knew it, even taught at the school named after Malcolm in New Jersey. Malcolm didn't get justice. Only one of his shooters was actually in prison. The other two men that were in prison for his shooting and his death, I think the other three, if I'm not mistaken, didn't do it. Only one of them recently got exonerated and won a lawsuit. He lost his kids and grandkids. Malcolm's daughters had to grow up without him. His widow had to turn to atheist communists for help because the Muslims wouldn't help her. And I'm talking about non-black Muslims with the so-called real Islam, which technically is, but they sort of abandoned it when they refused to help her because they just weren't willing to go into the racial justice aspect of it, which is whoever does not oppress and start the fight is the one that's right. They haven't figured that out yet. So I read some, to answer your question, Phantom, I did read a headline about that. But I'm really not sure what to say. I got mixed feelings about it. I mean, like I say, I believe that when it comes to the racial conflict, black is white and white is wrong. So black being right, I honestly think that affirmative action should be allowed at this point only for our race and with a priority for black males. And since the U.S. can't do that, I don't give a guck really what happens to the U.S. as long as it's bad later on. I hate to say that, but I'm just at this point, I'm numb to it. You know, whatever happens, I find myself numb. Because the right thing to do is to prioritize black males to get ahead. And that's one thing the U.S. it goes against the U.S.'s religion. They just can't bring themselves to do something like that. Asian Americans may have fought hard to get rid of it, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it will backfire because even though a lot of them, or at least they're reputed to have gotten in with grades on the basis of merits and grades, and maybe they did, the fact remains that they can still be excluded. I mean, we have to remember the white supremacy still has somebody that's preferred and it ain't them. Their phenotype is not the preference in white supremacy. They don't even prefer their own phenotype, with the exception of the ones from the southeast of their continent. So, it's a lose-lose scenario. You keep it, everybody gets ahead except for us. You get rid of it, everybody gets ahead except for us. All right. Jawad, that's true. The FBI and the CIA were watching. The CIA would follow him when he was abroad, and the FBI followed him when he was in the States. They did know, absolutely. And as a matter of fact, there was one outfit of the New York that became the basis for which the FBI later would become modernized and developed. The FBI existed at that time, but there was a unit of the New York police that wound up becoming the basis for the future FBI's developments, because they function similar to the FBI, just within the jurisdiction of New York City. Now, this is kind of doubtful because it appears that he was killed by multiples. MLK's family actually won a lawsuit, Charles. They won a lawsuit against the federal government for his death. They actually did. Malcolm's family, no. Now, this is one thing I wanted to say, Charles. One of the reasons that I'm asking for help from the audience, and I still don't believe that we should extend this to the ladies in the space unless they've been here a long time and consistent, is because when you go, what I would like to see is somebody that has paved the way, somebody that's already there, that will be in a position, maybe, I mean, you know, not to just throw money at you, of course, because that may be even insulting to you, but I want to see a situation in which when you go there, there's somebody in this space, one of the UBMPT, and since you're going to Indonesia or Malaysia, probably Muslim too, that at least would have the time, they could afford to take the time to walk you around the first few days and get you situated and show you how to do what you need to do, and even maybe to prepare you ahead of time. That's what I want to see be available to you. And what I request would go to being able to start something like that and then get you off at least to a good start. And then when you're able to get off to a good start, then you'd be able to do the same for someone else. I want us to start something in which we pay it forward. That's what I'm trying to get. Now, Art Zucker's in Indonesia, and I'm sure he'd be glad to help out. But also, I know Art Zuck's going to have to work. And so the time could be an issue. But I want to see a situation in which, just like if brothers go to Thailand right now, if they go to Bangkok, there's somebody there to walk them around and get them off to a good start. If they go to Pattaya, Richie Mack, the travel OG, he's there to get them off to a good start. And I want to see this in other areas. This is what I'm trying to get started. So, Jawad, this right here, this is one of the reasons that he was considered to be dangerous. And MLK figured this out too. This is one of the key things for which back then they would target you for assassination, or at least try to sit back if somebody else wanted to do it. This is one of the reasons. One of the things you figure out is that the political parties don't really care. This is very true. See, in Egypt and Morocco, it's necessary because those are two scamming nations. Absolutely. If you're alone by yourself in Egypt, they're going to try to fleece you. Absolutely. It's corruption. In Morocco, they're a good bit nicer, but people still have more of a begging culture there. And they will lie to you about what things cost if they can do so. Absolutely, they will. So those are areas in which that network is needed. But we do need to extend it abroad. And I want to see us do this in Southeastern Asia and in Latin America, as well, especially Southeastern Asia right now, and on our own continent. I want to see that there. Just like you do. So this here, with the SCOTUS ruling on affirmative action, these Asian Americans want to go after affirmative action, but more people get in on legacy admission. Yes, they do. The thing is that many Asian Americans, and keep in mind that the ones that want to do this are largely certain nationalities. Because like I said, they have a hierarchy themselves, even back in Asia. And they take it to them, they take it with them to the West. So what they want to, the ones that want to do this are largely going to be the descendants of Chinese, Koreans. I'm not sure how many of the Japanese feel, because the Japanese don't have a big diaspora in the United States or in the West as a whole. They have a multi-generational diaspora in California and Hawaii, but they pretty much they have pretty much melted in at this point. But Hold on. Now, Phantom, let me ask this. This is a valid point, but you said information proving that 25 are actually qualified. So are you saying that, was this a typo when you meant to say 25% are unqualified? Or did you mean to type it this way? And I'm only asking to make sure, not to clown you. But or did you mean to type it this way, which means that 75% are not qualified? I just want to know which one. Is it 25% that benefited or 75% that benefited from affirmative action? I'm just trying to double check, that's all. Yeah, mostly, this is true. Mostly them. Mostly them. Okay, so 25% are unqualified. Got you. 25% unqualified. So that means that 75%, it's okay for them to be there according to the objective standards of the grades. But still 25% is a pretty large chunk that are not. Now, if it was 75% unqualified, even I would have been shocked because of the culture. But this is something I wanted to point out too. Because if 25% are not qualified, that still means that you got a fourth of them that are not living up to the stereotype that not only do we have of them, but the stereotype that they have of themselves. That's what this means. And this is important for us to understand when we're dealing with all these other communities. They don't have all this stuff together. The thing is that what happens is that they get visas to go to the UK or the US, and they get to leave their failures behind. Back in Korea, back in China. Remember that series, Squid Games, I think is the name of it. What is Squid Games about? It's about a bunch of Korean niggas. That's what it is. The failures or the outright idness amongst the South Koreans. Owing money but never having, always needing but never having, always broke, using up somebody else's money for stuff, bad spending habits, not being successful. This is what that stuff is about. But since it was made in South Korea, in the Korean language, they can't hide this. They didn't make that series hoping that the world wouldn't see it. No, they just don't want you to see it. But then when they go over to the States and they've left all their failures behind, they want to sit up and act like they're not failures. Look, I see something similar in Saudi Arabia. In Saudi Arabia, you can come on a U.S. passport and visit, and that's fine. It's a visit. Many countries allow U.S. citizens to visit with a passport. You can't move there with a passport. You got to get a visa for that. But you can visit with a passport. You get an airport visa. It's good for however long the country stipulates it's good for. Then you got to fit the guck out. That's how it works. I'm going to tell y'all straight away. And I meant to pronounce it like that, straight away. I'm going to tell y'all straight away. When you gentlemen go to Saudi Arabia on a visa to work like I did, you are then going to be around Britishers, other Americans. Most of you listening are listening from the States, but you're going to be around Britishers, other Americans of multiple backgrounds, but on the citizenship and passport of the US or the UK, South Africans. I'm going to tell you all, this is important to understand. You know about the idiots that are over there in the US. You know about the ones that are failures. Look, you don't have to be a failure to not be able to get a visa to go to Saudi Arabia to live and work. You can just have all your degrees and credentials in the wrong field. That's it. There are jobs in neighboring Gulf countries that I can't get because my bachelor's degree is not in education. My master's is, but not my bachelor's. So some of the nicer jobs, especially for universities in the UAE, some of them ain't going to ever hire me. It's not that they hate me. They just have too many applicants who have bachelor's and master's in education, plus other certifications. And they say, well, I mean, you're never going to be able to compete with them because they outnumber you so much. We would never even get to your application. That's why. So if you don't have to be a failure to not get visas to come and live, you must understand that if you are a failure, you can't come here to live. So when we're in our work environments, I automatically know this American is not a Pookie, white or black, or any other origin. I know he ain't no Idnis, he ain't no Pookie, he ain't no Ray Ray, unless he's mentally unstable. But somehow managed to get a bunch of credentials. Now, we've had some people like that. Usually they needed medicine, and the medicine was not available here, and they found out after they got here, or the medicine didn't work. The versions of the same medicines here didn't work. We've had people like that. That's as close as we've come to outright Idnis, Pookies, Ray Rays, negative stereotypes of any race for us. But that's because the country weeds that out. You're facing the same thing when you're in the United States and you hear these pro-blacks talking about the Indians got their stuff together. No, they don't. Send them back to India. They're going to see the failures. The Indians living in the United States, I mean from India, not the original Americans. They were handpicked. Every time one of them got a visa, a bunch of others got visas turned down. And those are just the ones that applied for visas to go to the U.S. Now, the UK tends to do it a little bit different. They're a little bit more lax in who can get a visa to go there. But understand, even then, there's some weeding out that goes on, that went on. Man, the Arabs got their stuff together. No, the nuck they don't. Maybe I should have said no, the duck they funked. Point is, they don't have it together. I've been to Morocco. I spent 8 hours in Egypt unintentionally. Didn't want to. I wanted to just go through the airport, but because of somebody, I want to say this word, but it starts with a T and it ends with a T. It ends with an IST, if y'all catch my drift. Because one of them called in a threat to the airport in Egypt. The flight that I had to take from Morocco to go to Egypt was late, so I had to stay overnight in Egypt for 8 hours. Didn't want to, bro, that was bad. Just going from the airport to the hotel, I could see how bad it was. Mind you, I already don't like the way Egyptians talk. Their Arabic is jacked up. And I don't appreciate their mentality. You want to see a people proud for nothing, that's an Egyptian. I'm saying this without even hating them. I just don't agree with them. I don't have to agree with them. The only argument I was about to get into during Hajj was with an Egyptian because he was so proud of his accent. I was like, bro, I'm sorry, you don't make sense. You're not even speaking Arabic. You're speaking a related language, but it's not Arabic. You expect me to understand it. I'm not even hateful. I'm just telling you I don't understand what you're saying. No, I will not change my Egyptian accent. Okay, then I'm not going to understand you. Go get a translator. I'm saying this to say that you go back to these places and you're going to see what the mess is they left behind and why they're in such a hurry to leave. A lot of people don't even want to go to the U.S. because of the problems that the U.S. has. But when they get a visa to go to the U.S., they'll take it because they didn't get one to go to a slightly better nation like one of the Gulf nations, like the UAE or like Kuwait. If you can give one of the non-Gulf Arabs a visa to go to either a Gulf nation or to go to the U.S., they're going to pick based on how religious they are, generally speaking. Many of them actually want to go to the Gulf, but they can't. They apply to both and they get a visa from the U.S. Embassy. And then after they get the visa approved, they're sent the message. You have to come for a follow-up appointment and orientation at the nearest embassy or consulate. That's what happens. So they get their racial orientation when they go there. A Tunisian told me about this in Atlanta. She taught with me at a Muslim school in Atlanta and told me that when she was getting ready to go from Tunisia to the U.S., that I think they only have one embassy there. I don't think they have consulates. She said she got the call. She and her husband had the visa approved. And then they said, you must come for a follow-up appointment. They went to the embassy for the follow-up, the orientation. And they were told, stay away from the N-words. But back in her country, at the time she left, you had massive unemployment. You got beggars. You got everything. Everything you see in the hood, you got it over there in Tunisia. And they're highly educated. Per capita, they got the highest educational rate amongst all Arabic-speaking countries. You think that everyone, well, not even you, most of you in my audience know better, but you got these other folks in the pro-wax circles talking about how everybody else is together, but they don't understand. The U.S. embassies and consulates handpicked who even got to go to the States and told them stay away from the N-words. That's what they were told. So they left the dysfunctional idness back home in their countries at those airports. Don't believe me? You go fly to the Delhi airport. When you get out of customs and you get your bags and you walk out into the regular part of the airport with everybody, you're no longer in that secured area. You frequent travelers know what I'm talking about. You do that and they're coming up to you, taxi, 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 and that's not all. That's where it starts. I ain't even been to Delhi and I know about this because the people who've been have told me about it. You get over there, you get out into the regular part of the airport where you don't have to have a boarding pass to get in. And just the people trying to take you where you want to go, they're already starting. Because for one, they want to know if it's your first time in that country. Because if it is, they're going to lie to you about what the taxi costs. I know because the dude ran that game on me in Malaysia. And I was just nice and went ahead and gave him a chance anyway. And to tell the truth, I was actually hoping because, by the way, he was Indian from Chennai, but this was in Malaysia. I'm going to tell you why I went ahead and took the ride. I'm going to tell you why. He pulled up after I ordered a Grab, a ride share. And that's what it is there. Dude said, you ordered Grab? And I was like, yeah, I did. How come it doesn't match what it says on here? And he said, because that guy canceled. He asked me to come and get it. He called me up. I said, really? Okay, so how come he didn't cancel it on the app? He told me because he can't. So I turned to this lady, a Malay lady standing next to him and asked her in English, is this dangerous? And she nodded her head, yes. I said, cool. You know why? Because I wanted to fight with this dude. And I'm ashamed looking back on it. Well, not ashamed. I don't feel ashamed, but I do look back on it and think that was stupid of me. I must have really been sleep deprived from the flight. But see, I mean, I know how they feel about us. And I was like, hell, I know how they feel about us. I'll whoop this dude's behind. It'll be self-defense probably anyway, but he wasn't aggressive. However, he did run the game and he lied about something and I didn't know the price. And this ain't even in India. This ninja had a visa to get to Malaysia somehow. That's what I'm saying, man. Right off the bat, you go to some of these places and Malaysia's generally safe. But you still got idiots. They got robberies at the 7-Elevens there. I've seen the video footage. And this is very true. Here in the Gulf where I am, Jawad is right. It's safe, but you got really unmotivated people. They don't want to do nothing. Capital N-U-F-F-I-N, nothing. I teach them. Well, I used to. Probably get back to it soon, inshallah. And they're not dangerous. They ain't walking around with guns. Some of them got knives on them. Because these cats could get into fights over card games, not with strangers, but with people they don't know. I mean, with people that they do know. They could get into fights over that. You got people here getting into fist fights with their relatives over money. No joke. Ninjas with a capital N and 4 I's in the middle and an exclamation mark after the Z, not the S. Ninjas, exclamation mark. They get that bad even here, they're just not dangerous to everybody. We got to get rid of this notion that everybody else got their stuff together, because they don't. And where I live, you'd rather be from Sudan than to be from Bangladesh. Now, who's blacker, a Sudanese or somebody from Bangladesh? You tell me, which one is blacker, the Sudanese or the one from Bangladesh? I'll give you a hint. Sudan is the plural of black. Does that help you all out? You don't want to be here on a Bangladeshi passport. You don't want that. Over here, they'll tell you the Sudanese are honest. When they think of crime, they usually think of people from Bangladesh, especially low-level street crime like prostitution or drug dealing. They're usually thinking of people from Bangladesh, even though most of them don't do that stuff. This right here, Charles Wright, spent a week in India, and he saw just a week, and he saw the massive poverty. That's why they leaving. And I'm not even saying it's just a crap on Indians. I take everyone as an individual. Y'all know that. But yeah, that's what they do. When they get over to the States, because they've been oriented at the embassy, if not through TV or both. And they're sitting up saying to you, well, how come you don't have your stuff together and you've been here 400 years and I just got here? Because you got to plan for the trip, ninja. We didn't even have to buy a ticket. We had to buy our way to stay home. That's why. They want to make these comparisons. They used to do this stuff to my dad before my father retired. He worked with a lot of them. If you really think that I have a bias against them, you should hear my dad. He told them, y'all a bunch of brown punks. You want to sit up here and call me on my off hours to do a white doctor's job because you don't want to disturb him. F you. I heard him saying it. The older he got, the worse he got. When I was a grown man before he retired, he started having these conversations and I could hear him when I was visiting. And he was more like this when I was visiting because he was going to spend time with me and he wasn't going to be as forgiving when they would interrupt. He'd say, how come the doctor that you're calling me to replace didn't call me with this stuff? Because he's not trying to bother me when I'm off work, but you feel comfortable calling me first. It's because you don't want to make another one of the white doctors mad. You a brown punk. And one day I asked him, hey, yo, Pop, he asked me, one day he asked me, son, why do you call Arabs niggas? Now I don't do that no more, but he asked me that. And I said, because they got the same bad habits. This is back when I lived with them. Before and after becoming Muslim. At the time I became Muslim, I lived in an apartment by myself around the corner. But before and afterwards, I lived with them. I heard their arguments, even in English. I was like, yo, dang, y'all argue about this too, huh? Dang. So he asked me that, and I said, hey, Dad, here's the reason why, and I explained it to him, but then I said, but Pop, how come you always calling the Indian doctors brown punks? And he told me straight up, because when I'm off work, I'm just not going to sit up here and let them bother me during my off time. He said, I've seen this happen. They don't stand up to white doctors for anything. They have no boundaries when a white doctor says anything to them. No boundaries. Yes, boss. Okay, boss. And I don't know what that head movement is, son. That's what my dad said. He said, I don't know what that head movement is, but it looks like they're trying to say yes and no at the same time. I bust out laughing because I didn't know what it was either. I mean, I saw it before, but I didn't know what it meant. I still don't. But my dad and I were cracking up about that. And mind you, this is me with no hatred for them, but I do disagree with them. And my pop even said, I've asked them for basic things, and then all of a sudden they got boundaries. But to make matters worse, they love to come to me and ask me, well, Dr. Mind, how come you black folks are still struggling? You've been in this country 400 years, and we just got here and we're doing okay. And he got sick of them asking that question because if they read history, they would have known. And he's right. What it means is that they'll study medicine or engineering or software, and they should, but they don't study history. The only history they ever learn is what's told to them by word of mouth or what they see on TV, nothing else. They know that their country was colonized by white folk. They know that nobody from any part of Africa or anyone darker than them ever went into the country and colonized them and oppressed them. They know this. Without reading a history book, they know this. You know what? Because they don't read, they don't critically think outside of their particular field of expertise. What separates us from them is that at least we value history, even though we don't read enough of it. At least we somewhat value it. We don't value literacy, but to be honest, they don't either. So we got to stop letting them come along and tell us that they got all this stuff together, because that's part of where it is that some of us go so conservative, conservative, that we go Republicans and start being like Kanye. If Kanye read more, and I can tell that Kanye does not read, because I can tell you by the way that ninja writes. I've seen his writing on social media. Octave up spelling, no capitalization, missing punctuation, jacking up and confusing homophones. No. You write like that, you obviously don't read. You obviously were too cool for school when you were young. Don't write trying to preach to us now. I can tell. That's Kanye. And see, that's why Kanye can say some of the stuff he says that's completely off balance. I'm not even talking about what he said about who's in control. If you ask some of them, they'll tell you they're in control. They're only canceling him because he said their name, not because of even what he said about them. That's why they're canceling him. He said their name. They don't mind telling you in secret, yeah, we run this. Yeah, that's right, Ninja, we run this. Because remember, no group minds saying to black people, we're over you, we're better than you. We just got here and look at you, you've been here 400 years. They don't mind saying that. But when you start to say, yeah, you've had this advantage and that advantage, that's when they start coming at you. Believe you me, if the Indian community had the same political power as a whole that the community Kanye discussed, they would do the same thing. Absolutely. They'll say, why don't you have things and you've been here 400 years and we just got here and we're doing okay? They'll say that, but you turn around and you say, you know, you've got to plan your trip. And you probably show bank statements to the embassy because that's one of the requirements, by the way. Did y'all know that? U.S. embassies ask people to show bank statements if they're coming from non-first world nations. You got to show bank statements to show that you got a lot of money. If you're trying to come in from Australia, which is a first world nation, you may not have to do that. But you're trying to come in from Uganda or India, you got to show bank statements to show that you got money. See, they don't tell you that. And what many of them do is they get family members to put a lot of money in one account, their account, get the bank statement, then they give the money back to the family members, take the bank statement over to the embassy, and hope that the embassy doesn't say, now, can you bring a more recent bank statement or can you bring another? Hoping for that. Hoping. If you say to them, listen, you had the advantages, your family helped out, you planned the trip, you came with something, you didn't get knocked over the head, kidnapped, and thrown into the system like we did, then if they had the same political power, they would do the same thing. And they would come to my father and ask this, and my father would tell them the same things. He would say, you planned the trip. Your dad was a doctor. Both of your parents might have been doctors or some sort of professional. You were given preferential treatment to come over here back in the 70s anyway. Do not ask me that question. You know the answer. We got knocked over the head. We didn't want to come. And if we had never been forced over here, you wouldn't want to come today. If they didn't force us to come over here, they would have had to force you instead to make it what it is. Because somebody had to build this and not have in order for you to come over here and have without building it. You get to just maintain it. That's what my father would tell them. And they didn't stop asking. And that's when my dad started getting mean with them when they would call on the phone. And some of them wouldn't control his schedule on positions above him. And my dad risked his career telling them, you brown punk, don't call me on my off time because a white doctor ain't show up. Call another white doctor. Last thing my dad told me was that the same ones calling him to fill in other people's schedules were the ones that would ask him these dumb questions to try to prove that they were superior and better than us. And that's why he would talk this way to him. He's retired now. He doesn't have to have these conversations, and I'm glad. But you know what? Sorry I got off track, but this is going to come up later. See, right now, we have white males and females in discussions with us, which is normal. That's okay. But what's going to happen later is that we're going to have more people of other backgrounds, but they're still Western born and raised, that are going to enter into these discussions with us, and they're going to bring in their cultural views. You're going to have a hell of a lot more Amiras, in other words. And they're going to have a white worldview like Amira does. Without hatred, they're going to have a white worldview, and we're going to have to shut them down too. And this is where it becomes important for us to travel, because we're going to have to know some of these folks, and we're going to have to know their homelands, and we're going to have to know the difference between the ones of them born in the UK or stateside and the ones like their parents who were born back home and then migrated. We're going to have to know all these things, and we can shut them down. If you really want to do that. The other option is you shut them out of all conversation together and you tell them, if you don't accept that we're right and everybody else was wrong for siding with Massa, who is wrong, then F you, discussion over. These are going to be the two options. I'm in favor of the first one for one reason. It will turn the youth against their parents. That's why I even care enough to say anything about it. Wa alaikum salam, Abdullah. And thank you for sending those links, man. Wife and I got on it. We didn't hear nothing, but we got on it. So yeah, check out what Charles is saying now. 2,000 years, it might even be longer than that. Because they've probably been around, as a matter of fact, the invasion probably happened over 2,000 years ago, and they were there first. And to be honest with you, one of the things about the Dalits is that even though the Dalits are not all the same complexion throughout India, what generally happens is that they are among the medium to darkest in whichever area you find them. And here's the other thing. The word Dalit comes from a word dalon, which means to oppress. This means that they are named after oppression. They're named for being oppressed. That's how they got the name Dalit. And they've even had a Dalit Panther movement, a Dalit Panther Party they've had for decades now. They got it from the Black Panther Party in the US because a lot of them understood the corollaries and the similarities. That's how bad it gets. A lot of us didn't know that, but yeah, it gets that bad. This is a global thing. Well, I shouldn't say global because that means that there's no exceptions, and there are exceptions. They do exist, but this is internationally widespread, this pattern. And so if we're going to deal with Jess Pearley and talk about her right now, the way that we're having these arguments with the pro-wax on the opposite end of the extreme, then we're going to have a sharper memory, and we're going to have to utilize this to prepare ourselves for the others that are going to come in, and they're going to have the same worldview, racially speaking, that not only Jess Pearley has, and this is devoid of hatred, by the way, but that also Daniel Hakikachu is going to have. And for those of us that are Muslim, we're going to have to prepare ourselves for the ones that are going to come in with, that are Muslim, and they're going to come in with this racial view. And like I said, a lot of them are going to have it without racial hatred. They're still going to have that subconscious mindset that tells them that like white is normal and black is somehow abnormal, something to be fixed. They're still going to have just that much. And that's reason enough to call someone a disbelieving, blaspheming, hypocrite kafir. Not because of a preference they might have on a personal level, but because what they're really saying is that the oppressor is somehow the moral equal of the one whom they oppress. And that's an unacceptable moral doctrine to have in any religion, but especially in ours. I call them these names, hypocritical, disbelieving, kafir, because when they say these things consciously, they will then be changing the definition of right and wrong, halal and haram, and they will be blaspheming against the law, which will make them such when they do it consciously. And we got to be prepared for that. Gender and racial justice is going to divide many Muslims as apostates from the rest of us. They're going to hold to their racial views when you point out why it's wrong, and still they're going to hold to them, and that's going to be when they exit, even if they don't mean to. Just like they want to say that maybe you're a pseudo-Muslim because of some so-called black nationalist views that you might have, even if you only believe in justice. They'll take what I said and say, oh, see, that's that black nationalism, and that's incompatible with Islam, not realizing that their views, even though they never consciously thought of it this way, their views will be white nationalism, still white supremacy. They just won't realize it until we point it out. And when we point it out, we make them aware that in actuality, we're reacting. We got to defend ourselves. You're the problem. You think the oppressor is normal. And then when they realize this and they're aware of it, but they don't drop that racial view they have, that's going to be when they step into blasphemy. Because in a nutshell, they're going to be saying that Allah instinctively made human beings with this color preference, and that's indirectly calling Allah a racist, and that's blasphemy. They don't realize this. A lot of us didn't because we weren't trained to think this way, but they were subconsciously trained to think that if you were any way pro-black or even just pro-justice for black people, then your Islam is in question. That's their viewpoint. They don't have to consciously think of it that way. They will doubt your Islam because of that. Oh, you think the white man's the devil, huh? I think the oppressor is the devil. If that means the white colonizer, then that's the devil. The same thing would go for black oppressors too, but nobody's trying to justify them. No one's trying to explain it away. No one is. Hell, if you're black and you just fight back, they want to say that they want to call your morality into question. And if you're black and you're Muslim and you fight back, they want to call your Islam into question. These are apples and oranges. They don't compare. And this is why I said that when it comes to race and gender, we got to be one-sided. Not because right is not right and wrong is not wrong, but because right now the scale is only imbalanced in one direction. There's only one side always down and the other side always up. That's all it is. In the West, it is misandry. Chauvinism is not the problem in the West. Chauvinism is no more than an individual mindset some men have. Some men. And most of them have the sense to fuck the shuck up and not say anything about it. Misandry is openly acceptable, preferred in some circles. Racially speaking, it's the same thing. Despite a so-called left, despite the presence of that, we are still not identified as being correct morally in a racial struggle. I didn't say we always right about everything. I said in a racial struggle, we are the ones that are morally correct only because we didn't start that. And people don't even have the decency to admit to that. And that's where this happens. That's where this comes from. So, you know, really, this goes beyond just pearly things. Oh, get ready, gentlemen. You want to debate about her? You have a good memory for where she actually needed to be corrected, like Crimson did at the time that she needed it. Crimson talked about that before everybody forgot. The rest of us, they moved on, the rest of us forgot because of other things going on. We got distracted by Malika Andrews, Emir Udoka. I'm not knocking us for being aware of these things, but we got distracted. And then when people started talking about pearly things, we forgot where the point really was valid to correct her. That's where it was. Crimson was the one that brought the balance. Crimson said she don't mean no harm, but she white. And she can't see it the black folks' way because they're not trained for that. That's why a lot of them can come into the space and they can talk about the problem with gender. And see, I said a long time ago that the gender relationship is not like the racial relationship because the genders do need each other. Races don't rely on each other for their survival. As a matter of fact, I might have been wrong about that because Europeans probably do need some of us to consistently move out of the tropics to become them in order for them to stay in existence. We don't need them for our existence. We're going to have to be dealing with this too. Why is this important? What I just put on the screen from Charles Irving. Here's why it's important. One, the caste system that they have is against the religion. That's the first thing. We already know that. But the second thing a lot of us may not think about, but it's still important, is that they tend to make up the majority of the Muslim population outside of Indonesia. Worldwide and in the United States and in the UK, they make up the majority. People from the subcontinent make up the majority of the Muslim population. Arabs are actually a minority amongst the Muslims globally and in the UK and in the US and probably in Canada as well. They're not the majority. They are bringing in with them bad habits that cannot be justified Islamically. And they, along with many Arabs that identify as white, are going to turn around and support a lot of the white nationalist talking points of Muslims. And then you're going to have Muslims coming in as white nationalists. That's what's going to wind up happening. It's already in the case. It's already there. So see, what Artzuk said, this is true. What Charles also said is true. Both of these statements that you just saw on the screen are true. It's not in the religion that you have this caste system, but the people claiming Islam in the subcontinent do have a caste system in their culture. And we are going to have to be ready to insult the culture of these people. We're going to have to be ready to look some folks in the face, even when they share the same faith as us, and say, yeah, our religion is true, but your culture is backwards. If you are a Christian, you're going to be debating with Indians and Pakistanis that are Christian. Not just Hindus or Muslims. You got plenty of them that are Christian, and you're going to have to be able to look them in the face and say, okay, yeah, you both believe in Christianity, but their culture is backwards because they can't understand the equality of man. And they can't understand basic morality, that oppression is wrong. Yeah, that's what's going to happen. This is exactly why I said that we got to prepare for this. Hell, a lot of them ain't even going to be immigrants. They're the children of immigrants. Having grown up in the States, there was a time when the children were a little bit more exposed and understood what it was. They didn't stand up to their parents, but at least they knew what their parents were wrong, and they weren't going to pass it on to their own kids. Now, we're seeing that they're willing to take on even more nationalism than their own parents. That's where the issue comes in. And we're going to have to be ready to look at these folks and tell them, no, you know what? Your culture is backwards and inferior. Not because Massa said so. He thinks everybody's is based on the color and complexion of the people practicing the culture. No, yours is backwards and inferior because you don't have the moral understanding of what's right and what's wrong in the first place. You think the oppressor's right. You think you can normalize and justify oppression as long as it's the paler oppressing the darker, and that's not acceptable. This is also true. And this is a lot of times, this is why it is that I've said to you all that if you're going to go to the subcontinent, Bangladesh is where you'd want to go. They may take a while to get used to you, but they don't hate you for the most part. And as a matter of fact, in the Bangla language, one of the compliments that a man can give another man is to call him black, Kalu. A lot of us don't know that. You can call them Kalu and it's a compliment in Bangladesh. You better not do that in Pakistan or India. Call some, I think that it's Kale in Urdu and Hindi. You call somebody Kale there and they want to fight you. Even if you meant it as a compliment, I know I did it. I saw that myself. Some of them will turn around and call us bandar, which means monkey, and then you pluralize it as bandara. And they'll do that. Now, I called somebody that one time because he was actually imitating some baboons and monkeys and some cats. But I regretted doing it because the Hindi speakers that heard me thought that I was calling him that because he was black. And in actuality, I was doing that because he had put some gold teeth with fangs in, and he started thumping his chest and swaggering around as a joke. And I had explained to the two of them later who were Muslim, I didn't call him that because of his race. I called him that because he was actually imitating a baboon and a gorilla at that time. I want to make that clear. And to their credit, they got it. They understood. But see, we're going to have to face the fact that there's going to come a time where even though we may believe in whatever faith in which we believe, in my case, and Abdullah's and Charles and Jawad's and Artzuk's being Islam, and others of you may strongly believe in the Jewish faith or the gospel, we're going to have to accept the fact that we're not the racial separatist. And when you're reacting to others' racial separatism in spite of religion, you're not wrong. Nobody can come along and tell you a mother cuss word thing. Shuck that fit. You tell a man, fit the guck out my face with that shunky mitt. And if you want to know what shunky mitt is, that's a spoonerism. So just reverse the M and the SH and you'll get what I mean. You got to tell them this, because the racial separatism that people have tends to be automatic against whoever's darker. It tends to run like that. That's why the Chinese in Malaysia don't look at the Malay people as equals in general. The Chinese in Indonesia don't look at the Malay people as equals. Mind you, they left their homeland, their mainland, to move to these areas generations ago. Now, 4 and 5 generations later, they still have maintained Mandarin. They picked up Dutch or English. Some of them pick up the Malay language and some don't. And the ones that don't will say, I shouldn't have to learn it because it's a retarded language. My man Bort Ladola told me about that when he went to visit. He told me about that mindset they have. And some of them do learn the Malay language and they're cool with using it, no biggie. But you still got some of the old heads there who themselves were born and raised in these countries outside of China, and they will sit up and they're gonna say, yeah, it's a retarded language. I shouldn't have to learn it. Assalamu alaikum, black agent. And that's very true. This is another example of that. As a matter of fact, Indonesia was one of the main resistors to colonization. It's one of the reasons I mentioned that this part of the world tends to be an exception. And next door to Indonesia, in Malaysia's history, there was a man named Mat Kilau, M-A-T space K-I-L-A-U. There's actually a movie about him on Netflix. It was filmed and they spoke in the Malay language, but they have the English subtitles. And they were resistant as well against the British oppression, colonization. Guess who was in uniform helping the British in large numbers? People from India. Yeah, they were helping the British, talking in Bahasa Melayu, telling the Malay people the might of the British Empire. No, man, shuck that fit. Mat Kilau fought. One of the reasons they made a movie about Mat Kilau was because this fighting happened probably in the 50s or 60s, or maybe the 40s. I'm not sure. It was quite a while ago, but within the last 2 decades, he resurfaced. They thought he was dead. He disappeared after some of the fights, and they thought he was dead, and then he resurfaced and was able to show some birthmarks to prove that it was him. And then shortly after he identified himself and he was confirmed, he passed away out of old age, like within days of that. And he was given a state funeral. So they made a movie about him after this point, but they didn't talk about his resurfacing. So in this region of the world, they fought against colonization with the same revolutionary spirit with which we accredit many people from Africa. And this is why it's important for us to travel. I want more of you to travel so that you will know not only who is who, but who is the exception. You want to know where we don't have enemies? You can go in, like I said, you got parts where you can go and you don't have enemies, at least not because of reasons of race. This is important for us to know. And this is why also I say we need to start to financially support each other. When I put those links up to the merchandise a few videos back, the first one where I use the acronym UBMPT, Union of Black Male Passport Travelers, and the importance of knowing each other on site. I put links up to this merchandise because, and granted, in the beginning, you're going to have to buy it at that high price because it's in the beginning. But one of the reasons I did that is because I want to see more of us financially supporting each other. Then this way, we have a mini economy. And this makes it easier for more of us to travel sooner and at younger ages and escape the matrix and learn firsthand, not just from each other, but learn firsthand who's actually an enemy, who's just kind of brainwashed and ignorant, but doesn't mean any harm, who's not an enemy, who's an ally, and how wide that spectrum is and where people can fall on it. That's why. That's one of the reasons I've been saying this. That's one of the reasons I'm talking about money right now in this one, giving shout outs to the donors and letting you know what you're going to have to say about Pearl and the other ones too, because all of these things will tie in together. That's one of the reasons for it. Now, look, I've gone on for 2 hours and a half, and I'm sorry about that. You guys have been really patient, and I know it's early in the morning. Some of y'all really shouldn't even be up by now. Yeah, some of y'all should have been asleep a long time ago, but I had to come on when I had time to do it. So that being said, I am going to ask you all to hit the share button and to ask others to comment as well in the comment section underneath. Because I want this to get around that really we're going to have to start to support each other. And I do mean financially, and that goes for me too. I know that I got to give as well as receive, It's just that I don't have to tell myself that because I already remembered it. But we got to remind each other. And you know what? I can't always give back to those who gave to me right now. I don't know when that's going to be. But what I do have to do is give to others. We all do. Times you can't pay someone back, then you got to pay it forward. We need to make this the ethos. Because studying takes time. Time does cost money. But we need to study in order to be able to not only educate each other, but even to be able to counterbalance the propaganda that's going to be coming from the same side of the aisle as Just Pearly things. And they're going to be saying things that Just Pearly ain't saying. With the white nationalism. Just Pearls is not a white nationalist. Look, ignorant, but she's not a white nationalist. But they're going to come from the same side of the aisle as her, but further along that side of the spectrum. And we got to be ready for that. And that's where the studying is going to come in, which is going to take time, which is going to cost money. I hope that this helps. I want to thank you all from the bottom of my black heart and the depths of my black mind for staying with me. And as always, black heart, black mind, blackout, assalamu alaikum, and black heterosexual non-select male power just because they don't like it. Financially too. And black patriarchy until extinction or judgment day. You may now move about the cabin for the next few minutes. After that, be seated and buckled in and prepare for arrival.